Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. My name is Christopher Ram. Thank you for joining me and my guest this evening, on which we celebrate Eid al-Azha. It's the celebration and the marking of sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice in life. And to all our Muslim brothers and sisters, we wish them peaceful holiday as we move into another year. Let me just say, as we often do, we observe the COVID-19 protocol. Both my guest and I are fully vaccinated, and I continue to implore all Guyanese to get your vaccination. This myth about we hear on the fake news, you are risking your lives and the well-being of your loved ones by following fake news and being reluctant to have the vaccination. So this is why over the past several weeks, since the reintroduction of Plain Talk, we have only a single guest, for the simple reason that we observe social distancing as well. My guest this evening confirms that he has had both vaccines, and has been vaccinated twice, and therefore, as best as possible, he is protected. And my guest is a member of the new and united Guyana, ANAG, Mr. Jonathan Yearwood. Mr. Yearwood, welcome to Plain Talk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ram.
It's not the first time.
It's not the first time. Thank you very much for having me back here. Before we get into any discussion, I'd like to say welcome, good night, happy Eid Mubarak to all my Muslim friends, all Guyanese, wherever you may be in the world. Please remember, sanitize, social distance, wear your mask over the nose and under the chin, and of course, most importantly, vaccinate. You must vaccinate. That is imperative. So,
Jonathan,
what are we talking about
thank you for
today?
that. Well, I notice you're probably wearing your shirt, a new and united Guyana.
Yes, I am a proud member of ANOG.
You gained some notoriety. I think it was sometime in March last year when you had a heated exchange at the election center for Region 4 with Ms. Carol Joseph. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. It is.
Tell us about that incident.
It actually took place on the evening of March 13th in the GCOM compound. But to give some background to what took place, we had the counting we started at the Ashman's building.
Yes.
That morning. And during the counting of that morning, Miss Joseph was a tyrant. She cursed the heads of missions of the American Embassy, the Canadian Embassy, the Canadian High Commission, the British High Commission.
You witnessed that yourself.
I was sitting right there.
Sure.
I was sitting right there. The head of the European Commission Union were there, and she lambasted them, told them to get out of Guyana.
How did you get involved?
Well, I'll come to that. I'm setting a background to what took place. Then she called Kit Nascimento stinking nasty. You know Pauline Chase, now president of the Guyana Bar Association. She threatened to stamp on Pauline Chase's face. And the police...
You're absolutely certain of
I
that?
am absolutely certain of this. The
I
police...
want you to be very careful.
Yes, I am.
This is public broadcasting.
This is public broadcast.
Privately owned station.
Yes.
And want you to be extremely careful
Yes.
and cautious.
The police did little or nothing to get her out of the office, get her out of the place. And she carried on throughout the morning in the GCOM building at the Ashman's building. when we broke off and they decided that they were coming back at the GCOM building after the High Court's ruling that it must be projected so that people can see what's going on. In the GCOM compound, when they started, and it started out that Mr. Mingo started to use a projector onto a white screen bed sheet, you could hardly see. The figures were still being called wrong. I had enough of it. So
You lost your cool.
I did. I got up. I had enough. I had enough of that. So I got up and I was walking out. And I distinctly remember telling Mr. Mingo that if this country erupts into violence, it will be because of him. As I was walking out, going my own way, Miss Joseph rushes to me. She's sitting 2 or 3 rows behind, gets up and rushes towards me. My first instinct is that she's coming to attack me after what I saw displayed earlier in the day. So, my first instinct is to defend myself against an attack.
But she did not physically.
No, she didn't.
No.
She came right up to me, right up into my space, into my face.
But what we saw
Uh-huh.
was you were also extending your hand into
Yes,
her
I
face.
pushed her away. Because she
But
said,
that's assault, isn't it?
whatever it is, but she said, I'm going to deal with you. So if you're going to deal with me and you're going to threaten me.
All right. So, I understand the
Mhm.
nature of the exchange. You did say that you touched her.
Yes, I did. I
She
pushed
did not
her.
touch you. Yeah, you pushed her.
She
did
didn't
not.
touch me. She didn't touch me. But that doesn't mean it's not self-defense.
Why did you get so upset that you would have? Why did you not back away from the exchange, which clearly was becoming very confrontational or had become confrontational? On
Mr.
reflection,
Ram-
how do you feel about the issue now?
Hindsight is always 20/20.
It's about 15 months ago.
Yes, hindsight is always 20/20. But what I will tell you, human nature has 2 instincts when threatened. Fight or flight. Fight or flight. You either stand up and face the fear or you run away from it. The way I was brought up,
Is it that binary?
mostly yes. It becomes
But
instinctive.
there must be some middle ground to this.
Well, I'll tell you what. If somebody rushes up to your face and you don't know what you already know that they've already threatened to kick somebody's face in early in the morning and threatened to spit on people and whatever else, and that person is running up to you, you can do 1 or 2 things. You can fight, stand up and be prepared to fight, or you can be prepared to run away. And there is no way, the way I was brought up. I have 3 brothers, and we fight ding-dong battles when we were children growing up. So I grew up in a place where my first instinct is to stand my ground. I'm not going to run away from you. I'm going to stand my ground.
What has been the outcome of that matter?
Well, I was arrested. I was taken down to the police station. And
Were you charged?
no, I wasn't charged. But when the police saw the video, because by the time I had arrived at the police station at Brickdam, the video was circulating on Facebook, on media, all over the place. The video was out. Basically, the police took 1 look at it and says, this is self-defense. She rushed right up to me. I was walking out. She rushed right up to me. She was a confrontationalist. So I have never been charged for that matter.
We talk about Guyana and the necessity
Mhm.
among political players, and you are a political player.
Yes, I am.
At the time, you were much more involved in the leadership
Yes.
of ANAG than you are now, perhaps.
Yes.
And we'll come to that.
Yeah.
Did that exacerbate the whole relationship between and among our political parties? Mustn't our leaders? You talk about what you at the family level,
Uh-huh.
but at a leadership level,
Uh-huh.
how do we bring about any kind of rapprochement, any kind of living with each other in this place called Guyana?
Chris, I'll tell you what. As I say, hindsight is 2020 vision is perfect. But if I had to do that over again, if I had to do that all over again, I would have ignored her and keep walking. Having reflected back on my position as a political leader, as a man, as a human being,
And meaning man as in an exchange with a woman.
well, regardless of whether it's a woman or a man or whatever, I should have tried to
No,
diffuse it.
you said as a man, and
Yeah.
I was wondering why you said man.
As me, as a mature man,
Okay,
I
as an adult.
I should try to diffuse the situation. I should try to diffuse that situation by ignoring her. I should have just looked at her, maybe laughed at her, smiled at her, and kept walking.
All right. So that matter, as far as you're concerned, is now a dead issue. Have the two of you reached out to each other since that time, maybe since August, and said, look, you know,
I met Carol during the recount. We never mentioned it. We never really spoke with each other. I have spoken with her daughter, who I met at the recount as well. And I have no animosity towards them. Because I understand Carol was doing what Carol does as a political activist. Her job at that point in time was to rile everybody up, because she was fighting for her political party to win the election. And I could understand that.
and what were you doing?
I was fighting for a democracy. Let the votes decide who wins. I don't know who won. At that point in time, I didn't know who won. I was hoping that everybody voted for Anog. I honestly was hoping that Anog would have come out and be the winner. Or at least the power broker into making a minority government, which is what Anog was hoping for at that point in time. But we did not know who won the election. So we were waiting. We wanted to see the actual results come out in fairness, and whoever won, won. That's it. Whoever won the election, won the election. It's not a matter whether we like one side and don't like the other side. That's not what we were there for. We were there to make sure that the voters' will was determining the winner.
Okay, we can move on. You said that you were hoping that Anog would have won, or at least done better so that it could hold the balance of power.
Yes.
It did not.
We didn't.
Now, were you being over optimistic, or what did Anog do or not do that caused it not to achieve its expectation?
Anog went into the election with the hope that we could win enough seats to create a minority government. We were hoping that one side wins 32, the other side wins 32, and Anog and the Guyana has one seat, which would mean that we now are, it's a minority government, whichever side becomes the government, it's a minority government, and we could be the one that keeps the government in line. Something similar to what AFC should have done years ago, but never did do. So that was our hope, that we could have win just that one seat to become that.
Before you go on, is that a fair comment on the entire period of the AFC's participation in electoral politics?
No.
Because,
No.
good, because you were making a rather sweeping
Yeah.
statement.
Prior to 2015,
Yes.
and even in 2015, AFC had my full support, because I never wanted to get into politics. Politics is not my name.
Okay.
Was never
I
for
just
me.
wanted to clarify that
Yeah.
point, because
Yeah.
you said
But it's what
never
AFC
did it.
did after 2015
15. Okay, good.
that caused the problems within. But prior to that, my personal belief is if AFC had not joined with the party in the coalition in 2015, they would have won in 2020.
Who would have won?
AFC would have won in 2020. Whether it be as a minority government or not, they would have won more seats than either of the two sides
Okay.
because their momentum was building.
Yes, we're talking about Anog's dashed hope.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, we gathered 2,000 votes, which was a great disappointment to me because I campaigned throughout this country. I went to Berbice, I went to Essequibo, I went to Linden, I stood up and I spoke all over, sometimes to nobody. But we did it. We live streamed it on Facebook, so people from all over the world saw us. We didn't have to be in Essequibo. People from Berbice were watching us online, whatever.
But in the context of Guyana's politics, people don't come to your public meetings. It's a major sign, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It is a major sign. But this 2020 election was not a normal election because Barrett Jardeo of the PPP had positioned the PPP in such a way that a lot of people were now against the coalition because of how the coalition had operated in their 5 years of governance.
Yes.
So it was the PPP now telling their people, you have to come home. If you don't come back to us, the PPP, we are going to have another 5 years of the coalition government. And you have seen what they have done in 5 years. So it became a divide down the middle of Guyana. And the PPP AFC supporters went back home. The PNCR AFC supporters went back home. So it was split. And the results showed that there were only about 9,000, a little over 9,000 voters who wanted neither of the two.
Yes.
And voted a smaller party.
You seem to be attributing, I don't want to use the word blaming, attributing the less than hoped for performance of Anog to the PPP and to their supporters. In other words, you're not accepting any responsibility that Anog did not do what it ought to have done. Its messaging was bad, its campaign strategy was bad, maybe even its leadership was bad, and I'm not saying it was, I'm saying that those are all possibilities.
I don't know how those things would have affected Anog in a normal election. 2025 will tell whether that will happen or not. But what I do know, it was a tremendous fight because you're fighting two gigantic political parties that had been ruling Guyana and been dividing Guyana since 1957.
And in
And
some
they're
ways,
well entrenched.
and they were well entrenched partly, but they also came with considerable baggage.
Yes.
Both parties came with considerable baggage.
Yes.
So that posed an opening, isn't it?
Yes, it
And
did.
this raises the issue, as I said, the messaging.
It did, but because of the PPP's thing, telling their people, look, you have to come home, or else we will have another 5 years of the APNU AFC coalition again. And there were quite a few PPP supporters who had moved over to the AFC, and they didn't, like me, they didn't want what the AFC was doing. They didn't like what the AFC was doing. So where were they to turn to? What were their choices? Their choices were either to stay with the APNU AFC and go through another 5 years of that, which they disagreed with in the first place. Two, they could vote a small party which they know nothing about, little or nothing about, because Anagood started in January 2019. So we had a year, 1 year, which, as you know, in politics is not a long time.
Well, they do say that 1 week in politics is a long time.
Well, that's what they do, but until you actually get people to try to get to know you, you were an unknown. And then we were also, by being a third party.
Your presidential candidate could not be described as an unknown,
No, he couldn't be.
Mr. Ralph Karan.
That's why he was elected as presidential candidate.
So it's not that he was.
It's not that he was unknown. But the party was basically an unknown. And what happened was, people had seen how a third party had operated in the AFC. And they were saying that all third parties will now do what AFC had done, which is unfair to us, to any small party out there. Because I don't think that every small party will do what the AFC did. So voters tended to split again and go back to what I would refer to as their base. Their base. What we're hoping for now is that over the next 4 to 5 years, before 2025, people in Guyana will stand up and say, we have seen what ANOG has done. We have seen how ANOG behaves. We have seen what they stand for. You are no longer an unknown quantity. So we will give you our vote in 2025. And it is our hope that in 2025, we can create a minority government.
No.
And I say that because both sides have strong supporters who, no matter what they do, will continue to vote for them. And that includes APNU. APNU has a strong base of voters who, regardless of what, will continue to vote for APNU. There's a minority, a very small minority of maybe 35 to 40,000 people who may be willing to vote neither of the two sides. And that minority is enough to create a minority government in Guyana.
Now, from what you've seen, you did mention the joiner, which was a new
Yes.
attempt at some kind of innovative approach
Yeah.
to electoral politics in Guyana.
Yeah.
How would you, ANOG is part of that
We
joiner.
are. We are.
How would you say ANOG has performed the joiner?
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about the
LJP, ANOG, and TNM.
TNM. TNM seems to have a whole set of leadership problems.
Yes.
The LJP seems to have gone rather silent. Its leader has been made deputy speaker
And an advisor to government.
and an
airport,
advisor to government,
on civil aviation.
which he's not a civil aviation specialist, is he?
No.
He's a pilot.
He's a pilot.
Trainee,
He's a big jet pilot.
Yeah.
I'll give him his due. He's a big jet pilot.
Yeah, but not a policy person. How would you rate the joiner
Mm-hmm.
since August 2nd, 2020? We're almost coming up to a year.
Almost coming up to a year. I am disappointed. It started out quite well because matters of parliament were initially brought to the attention of the other two parties. And then after a while I noticed those...
Which would you say are the other two? Who brought
Well, LJP has the seat at this point in time.
yes.
So LJP, the arrangement is anything that has to do with parliament, the three political parties have to agree. So if if Lennox Schumann wants to vote yes to a vote, he has to have the agreement of the other two political parties in the joiner. So it started out with that. Up to when I left ANOG, when I resigned from the ANOG executive, I hadn't heard very much of matters coming from Parliament to the three parties. So I'm not in a position to say whether that is actually taking place or not. I'm hoping that it does, that it is happening, but if it isn't, I would be very disappointed in this is what the joiner has become. because the joiner, I think the joiner is the way to go for future small parties in politics in Guyana.
And you see the matter like the LJP leader becoming an advisor to the government and practically part of the government.
Yes.
You see that as being a positive for the joiner?
No. The joiner is a member of the opposition. The joiner is a member of the opposition. We are not a member of the government.
What's been the voting record of the joiner?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Even
when I was in there, I have no idea.
Is the joiner not doing the same type of thing that APNU was accused of doing, that it wasn't consulting enough, it wasn't informing and enabling its constituent membership?
The joiner has had a very difficult year. TNM has had difficulties in their leadership.
One of their leaders has
six of their leaders have resigned. 6 members of their executive have walked away. One of which has now gone to become chairman of the URP.
Yes.
ANOG has had its leadership problems as well too. And I don't know what's going on with LJP, but what I do know is the 2 smaller parties have more or less been looking inwards rather than outwards.
You mean the
ANOG and TNM have been dealing with things that have been happening within, but that is not an excuse for us not to be also dealing with things outside of our political parties.
If you, the members, don't know,
yes,
how can the public? I mean, for you to be saying this publicly tonight, suggests that again the public is being let down. The electorate is being let down.
One of the things that came out from ANOG's internal wranglings. ANOG has a membership group on WhatsApp where all members of ANOG are invited to join in, and you're free to express your opinions and whatever else. And one of the things that came out of that group was the executive's lack of communication. And it is something that the new executive has to deal with, because if we cannot communicate with our members, how can we communicate with John public out there, as you rightly said? So it is something that this new executive, we recognize it as an issue, and I'm hoping that the new executive put things in place to correct it, so that we can keep the nation informed as to the going-ons and thought processes of ANOG.
Well, apart from the goings-on and thought processes, should ANOG not be taking a more active role in public matters? I mean, it can possibly do far more than it has done in Parliament.
I agree.
But we've got labor issues in this country.
Yes.
We've got environmental and existential issues to deal with.
Yes.
We have oil and gas to deal with.
Yes.
We have poverty. We have a trade union movement that has betrayed the workers of this country.
Yes.
ANOG has been silent on these matters.
Yes. And I agree with you. We have been silent on those matters. As a political body, we have been silent on those matters. And as I'm saying, these are things that have been brought to the forefront in the WhatsApp group, in the ANOG group, so that our leaders, our new executive, can look at this and say, well, we need to correct this. This is the direction we need to move in, because this is what our members expect from us. And I'm hoping that that actually takes place, that the executive listens to the membership and says, well, we need to do A, B, C, or D.
2 persons who I thought came out, three persons I should say, came out very positive from the fiasco of the recount and the 5 months. I think Timothy Jonas, his presentations, appearances before in front of the microphone, were really very good. Kian Jabur is the name of the I think he was the organizing secretary. What was his position?
His position was assistant general secretary.
Assistant general. And you were?
I was treasurer.
Treasurer.
Well, the financial secretary.
Elections have now been held. The chairman remains the same.
Oh, you're talking ANOG elections?
Yes, ANOG elections.
Yes, ANOG elections have been held.
Mr. Jabur, he has moved up.
Actually, his position is now the organizing secretary for the party.
And is there a general secretary?
The general secretary remains Ralph Ramkaran.
And does the party have a leader, or is the chairperson the leader?
Well, technically the chairperson is the number one and the GS is the number two. Basically that's it. But what I will say is that because of who Ralph Ramkaran is, when Ralph speaks, everybody listens, including the chairman. That's the esteem in which he's being held as.
Yes.
So we give him his due. Yes, we give him his due. But on the matters of the party, that falls to the chairman.
But in terms of the leadership, so nobody is held responsible. Say, look, well, maybe it's time that we rethink our leadership strategy or composition. It's time that we rethink our policies and the positions we take. Is that a process that ANOG is actively pursuing?
Yes. Yes. Because of the response gained from the members group, the new executive has to listen to what the members are saying. And then they have to create the policies that will take us into that direction that we need to go in. For instance, we have been, as you've noticed and you've made a comment on, basically, ANOG has been relatively silent for the last year since the new government has been sworn in. We need to rectify that because there are a lot of issues, as you've said, that need to be spoken out. We need to be vocal on these things to let the public out there know that ANOG is still alive.
But it's even more than that. This whole question of oil and gas, the fact that we have not introduced, other than the APNU OFC, for whatever its failings whatever failings might be attributed to it, it did have a sovereign wealth fund, a natural resources fund. In a single year, in which you've got the joiner playing something of a role in the National Assembly, not a single thing has happened in oil and gas. How can we have a situation like this? This has serious implications for climate change. And we can talk about moving capital. Moving capital is not going to help us because where you're going to put it? Global warming doesn't know sea level or anything like that.
It doesn't care who's in government either.
It does. So why it is not only addressing its membership for ANOG, it has to deal. It's supposed to be a patriotic party.
Ralph, Chris, what I will say is, what is going on in Parliament at this point in time is APNU AFC are still telling their supporters that the PPP government is illegal. It's an illegitimate government. We won the election. They stole it from us. So they're still telling their supporters that. And the PPP government is saying, well, we're not going to do anything and recognize you because you don't recognize us. So we're not going to have any talks with the leader of the opposition. We're not going to recognize you on anything because you don't recognize us. Now, that is petty politics.
But surely that runs against the grain of the Constitution as well.
It does. It does. Because recognition should become automatic.
But we're talking here about ANOG.
Uh-huh.
How can it be silent on these issues?
Well, this brings me to a point I would love to make here.
Go on.
With the failings of the APNU AFC coalition as an opposition in Guyana, as an effective and strong opposition in Guyana, the door is now wide open for ANOG to step into it and fill that role and become, we may only have a joiner seat in Parliament, but we can step into that role as the opposition and become a viable opposition by forcing the questions to be asked of our government and having them reply not only to ANOG but to the nation. And this is a great opportunity for ANOG to do that. This is a great opportunity for us to do that.
Given the performance of TNM and the LJP, are you comfortable that there's a future for the joiner with the composition as it is now?
That's a difficult question. I mentioned earlier that I think the joiner is the way small parties should go in the future, politically, when the time comes for elections, in which you reap the benefits of what you have done.
Yes.
You get X percentage of the vote, you get X percentage of the time in Parliament, which I think is a great idea. What I would like to change is that for your time in Parliament, you vote how you want to vote. The fact that we are tying you down to the rest of a unanimous decision, I don't think that works because it bogs it down into bureaucracy.
So you think the joiner, whoever is
Occupying the seat at the time
must vote however they wish?
vote however they want to vote.
Okay. Now,
Because as I said, for matters to come up and go to 4 or 5 different political parties, each one to decide for their executive to make a decision and then come back to here, it becomes cumbersome. And I can see that happening at this point in time.
but the joiner then becomes only a vehicle for getting to Parliament, not into pursuing policies. If everybody could do their own thing, what's the point of having a joiner?
Well, we can now get together and decide to pursue specific policies.
But is that what should happen now?
It should. It should. Whether it is happening or not, as I said, I have no idea. But it should be a policy-making body. But there are a lot of decisions, a lot of votes taking place in Parliament that it's very difficult to bring all those discussions to 3 parties or 4 parties or 5 parties in the future to have a consensus vote.
But that's how democracy works. Democracy is messy.
I know, very
Democracy
messy.
is inconvenient.
Very messy, very
But you
inconvenient.
name something better than democracy.
No, I can't.
That's it.
I can't.
So
It's the best of the worst that we have.
there's nothing better.
There's nothing better.
Show me something
There's
better and I'll
nothing
follow
better.
it.
There's nothing better.
Now, let's talk about you.
You mean me?
Yes.
Okay.
Jonathan Yearwood.
Uh-huh.
You were probably earmarked to go into the National Assembly when ANOG's turn comes around to send in the National Assembly. You did not contest the elections, so the internal elections at ANOG recently.
I did.
You contested it
I contested it.
and you lost.
No. The position I contested for was for the financial secretary, and there was a tie. Myself and the other gentleman that contested for the same position, we tied with an equal amount of votes. At this point in time, that tie has not been broken, and we're waiting to see how the executive deals with that. So that position has not been filled as yet.
So you're still a member of the executive,
No, I resigned from the executive.
but by virtue of being in that position, is that an officer but not a member of the executive of the party?
No. It's
No to what?
it's a tight vote.
No. Assuming you had won, would you have been a member of the executive?
Yes.
So you are still
I would have
Aspiring-
gone back on to the new executive.
you're still aspiring
Yes.
to be.
There's a lot I can offer, Anog, yes.
And how do you, given all the problems,
Uh-huh.
how do you, Jonathan Yearwood, how do you see yourself contributing to resolving the issues? Lack of communication, lack of policy focus, lack of internal management. How you see those things being addressed?
Anog would have to get two people very active. The Assistant General Secretary, who is a young lady by the name of Althea King, and the Organizing Secretary, who is Kian Jabor. They will now have to become extremely active in communicating between the members and the executive, and between the executive and the public out there. So they will need, because they are part and parcel of the executive, they will need to become the go-betweens between the two sides, the two sections of one is the members and one is the general public.
What I raised a number of areas, and you said that you suggested that you agree that the ANOG has failed in those areas.
Yes.
How do you,
Mhm.
Jonathan Yearwood, fix these problems? Or are those problems, in your view, fundamental? Unless they're fixed, you don't see ANOG doing what it's supposed to do.
The problems, to me, the problems are easy to fix. It just means that ANOG must find its vocal voice and speak out, whether on shows like yours, whether it's writing letters to the newspaper, whether it's press conferences, whether it's statements to the press. We can make statements on just about every issue happening in Guyana and let the public know this is ANOG's position on it.
But it's not doing it.
It's not doing it. That we recognize.
But this is failed leadership, isn't it? You know, this country lacks leadership in several areas.
We do, but in fairness to the new executive, I will not burden the new executive by saying that they have failed. They haven't even tried yet.
No, but we talk the past year.
Well, we know what happened in the past year, and they have been deficient in many areas. I was part of that executive, and yes, I accept part and parcel of that blame as well. We were not physically, vocally active in areas where we should have been. And as you said, it could be a leadership problem. Maybe it is.
And I meant collective leadership.
Collectively, because it's not for the chairman alone to make a decision. There are 10, 11, right now there are 15 members on the executive. The new executive will be a 15-man committee. So it will reflect on the 15. So we need to have every individual on the executive, even members of the political party, ANOG, becoming vocal. Whether we do it as an individual or we do it as collectively as a political
But the
party,
party has a duty. Otherwise,
the party has a duty to do that.
It said to the people, vote for me because.
That's right.
why are you asking people for their vote?
The political party has to become vocal to let the people know that we are representing you. We may not have the seat in Parliament right now, but we are representing you by highlighting these problems that are happening within our country.
But you are a member of the joiner.
We are a member of the joint.
Yeah, you can't ignore that. And
Well-
therefore,
We should be letting our joiner representative in Parliament do more. We should be at least attempting to have a motion, some kind of a motion. We campaigned on electoral and constitutional reform, so we need to start working on that. We need to start writing to the law reform committee that has just been
no,
organized.
appointed, yes.
appointed. We need to.
And they're about to be sworn in.
Yes. We need to start writing to the Constitutional Reform Committee and let them know what our thoughts are. Because these are things that we campaigned on.
But yes. But why at this time we talk about we need to? The leadership is full of very competent professional persons.
Highly competent professional persons, yes.
And so to say, oh, this new executive going to be better,
I'm hoping they are, yes.
that might be a false hope.
Well, if that happens, if we go back into what we were, the doldrums in which we were before, then we would have let down a lot of Guyanese.
But you already letting them down.
Yes, we are. Not
Look.
quite completely yet, but we're on the road to do that. But we have to stop and turn around and go back on the right road to allow Guyanese to know that ANOG is moving in the right direction.
Let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Is the joiner or any members, any of its constituent member, trying to reach out to the opposition as well? Has any attempt been made?
Not that I know of, no.
But surely, if you are saying you want to stand between the
Yes.
two,
Yeah.
and you haven't done the elementary task,
I think Ralph wrote a document, I think it was in one of his conversation trees, that we need to reach out to both sides.
but he's the general secretary of the party.
Both sides.
All you're saying here, Jonathan,
Mm.
is that we need to do things. You've
Yes.
been there,
Yeah.
and you're not doing it.
We're not doing it. We're not doing it.
You know, I find it shocking.
Yeah.
Take our minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
In the private sector, the minimum wage is $44,000.
Ridiculous for amount.
But then ANOG is silent.
A ridiculous amount.
The joiner is silent.
Yes.
The leadership is silent.
And I agree with you.
We've got an oil contract
Yeah.
that has some serious deficiencies.
Yes.
ANOG has been silent.
Very silent on it. Very silent on it.
So, ANOG can't criticize the AFC, or maybe the APNU itself, if it's not doing what we hope it will do.
Yeah.
If you want, as you said, your hope is that in 2025, the dream of 2020 will materialize.
Yeah. We got to start
Surely-
working on that now.
I don't have to say it.
We have to start working on that now. I will be the first to tell you, and I've said it, we have been deficient over the last year. We have been deficient in what the things that we are supposed to be doing over the last year.
Well-
Let us now move on and become efficient in what we need to do.
But up to last week,
Mm-hmm.
you were a member of the executive.
No,
When was the elections?
I think it was the 13th of,
July?
yeah.
Good, that's
No, I had resigned from the
oh,
executive.
you resigned from the executive.
I resigned.
So you resigned from the executive but sought to go back on the executive? That's a strange...
Well, I
How do
resigned.
you explain that?
I resigned for two very specific reasons.
You care to tell us?
Well,
This is a transparent situation.
yes, it is. When the Guyana fiasco fuel scam, attempted scam in April came about,
This is the purchase from some.
Yes. We had a member of our executive on the Guyana board at the time. And he has been accused of being involved in that scam. The president has dismissed him from the board. And ANOG had refused to ask him to withdraw from the ANOG's executive until his matter was cleared up.
Has that been done?
No, it was not done.
Well, don't say had.
It
has.
No, what has happened is we've now had an election, and he has not been elected back onto the board, onto the ANOG executive.
So, ANOG did not confront the issue.
ANOG made a statement.
Did not confront an issue.
ANOG made a statement that they will wait for the results, the conclusion of the investigation, before taking any action for or against the board member.
In matters like these, don't you ask the person to step back
Well,
to allow the investigation to proceed?
well, I asked for that. When I found out that he had been dismissed, initially when the story broke, we didn't know exactly what was happening. We heard his side of the story. But we all know a story got three sides: your side, my side, and the truth. We heard his side of the story. We decided at that point we're not going to say anything until we hear more. But then when we found out that the president dismissed him from the board, my first reaction was, you need to withdraw from the ANOG executive. At least I'm not accusing you of being guilty or not. I'm just saying that in good governance, you need to withdraw from the executive until the matter is cleared up.
Yes.
If the matter is cleared up in your favor, welcome back to the board.
And if the person doesn't step back, what should happen?
If it doesn't step back, the executive should step in and say, you need to move off.
Okay. And the executive did
They
not
didn't do that.
And what's the second issue?
The second issue was internal elections. I have been trying to have internal elections since September last year.
When were elections due?
April 28, 2020. We were elected in April 28, 2019 for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the election fiasco that was taking place, all of that was, we didn't have time for that. All that was
But that was
deterred.
resolved on August the 2nd, 2020.
It was resolved on
Almost
when a
1 year.
new government was sworn in.
Yes.
So immediately after that, I started saying, our mandate is up. We need to have an internal election. We fight for democracy. We need to be democratic. Have an internal election and let us go to the vote. Let the members elect who they want to elect as our new executive. I had 3 or 4 dates all set up. It never came to pass.
Why?
Every time
Why?
because members of the executive themselves were hesitant about having an election.
But that's not democracy.
It's not democracy. And this got me really annoyed. It reached a point where I had searched for a returning officer to conduct the elections. I had done all the work.
Was that within your sphere of responsibility in the party?
I was told that if I wanted to have the election, I would have to take on the job of doing it.
But that's not how
No,
organized
it's not. It's not.
Surely there's
It's
a
not.
constitution.
It's not. But I decided, because I wanted to have the election, I will get it done, because nobody else, well, I wouldn't say nobody else, but the majority of the executive at the time were not fully interested in having an election at that time. So what broke my back, the straw that broke my back, I spoke to a certain gentleman about being a returning officer, who had been suggested to me by no less than 3 members of the executive. 3 members of the executive had said, Jonathan, go and talk to this gentleman. And I went, and the gentleman said, willingly, but I need a letter, not from Jonathan Yearwood, but from ANOG, that states ANOG would like to appoint you as our returning officer. After 2 weeks, I wrote the letter. I sent it to the executive. They refused. 2 weeks, and I waiting for this letter to come back to get delivered.
So on that score, you resigned.
2 weeks, you don't want to sign a letter? You refuse to sign a letter appointing an RO, a returning officer, to conduct our internal elections? That told me you're seriously not interested in having an election. All I needed you to do, because the letter was approved, the letter had been approved, all I needed you to do is put your signature to the letter.
But
I would have taken the letter, put it in an envelope, addressed it to the gentleman, and handed it to the gentleman himself.
given all of this, you were still prepared to go back.
Yes.
And why? What makes you optimistic?
There's a new executive, and there's a lot of fresh blood. There's a lot of fresh blood on the executive, and I think that this
The
fresh
key
blood,
positions remain the same.
but they can be outvoted.
Okay.
They
On
can
the
be
executive.
outvoted. On the executive, they can be outvoted. But I am hoping that this new executive with new fresh blood on board can force ANOG into the right direction and make them do what they're supposed to do.
Well, let me ask you this. The meeting at which we just have a couple of minutes, the meeting at which elections were held, they did discuss policy and what was a policy framework for the next year discussed and decided on?
No, when I was still on the executive, everything was done basically on a case-by-case scenario.
No, but I'm talking now, you're a member, so whether you knew about it or not, you ought to have known as a member that you attended the meeting, I take it, even if it's virtual.
It was a virtual meeting.
So was a policy paper and a program for the next year presented to the meeting?
I think it was.
Well, it's a question of fact.
My audio was not 100%. So a lot of what was said, I didn't gather it.
But surely this is a matter for paper, not for what
Well-
was said.
Well, I haven't read anything on paper about it as yet. I haven't seen anything on paper yet. I haven't seen. I don't know whether it's there or not.
You know,
But I haven't seen it.
one hopes what this country needs is more small parties. You look at lots of other democracies.
Yeah.
Israel has 23 parties in the National Assembly.
Yeah.
The whole of the European countries,
Yes.
they all do.
Our problem in Guyana, though, is that we're so polarized. We're so polarized
But
between the two larger ones.
No, but it's a question of the quality of the leadership, and of course resources, etc.
Yeah.
But to me, part of the problem is resources is that all the political parties ignore the constitution, ignore the law.
They do.
GCOM stands indicted, in my view, for failure to observe the Representation of the People Act when it comes to election expenses. All the political parties, I think, ANOG has now submitted.
ANOG has submitted. I ensured that took place before I left.
But
As treasurer, that fell into my purview, and that was done.
it has done nothing to call on the other parties to meet the law.
As far as I know, no, we haven't called on it. But these are little things. These are the
These
little
are not
things.
little
that-
things.
Well, these are the things that can bring ANOG into the limelight and keep ANOG in the limelight. And unless we do them, people are going to look at ANOG and say, "Y'all too quiet. Y'all get buyout. Y'all are now PPP, whatever." And we're not. We should not be. We should remain independent, completely independent, and willing to work with both sides. I'm saying we need to work with both sides. We are a part of the opposition. we should also be looking to see how we can help the government.
Government. Absolutely.
So it's not that we're picking a side. We need to work with both sides.
Well, it sounds like there's lots of work. You kept saying
Yes, there is lots of work.
ANOG needs to do. ANOG has not adopted a policy framework for the next 12 months. That's a serious deficiency. But time has caught up on us. I want to say thank you very much. I think we have 30 seconds because I don't see the extra flashing light, and I'll give you the last 30 seconds before I come back in and close.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for watching us tonight. I would like to say that ANOG will remain relevant. ANOG should be going down the right road from now that we've sorted out our internal elections and whatever else. New committees are on board. They will take ANOG into the right direction. We need your support. We can't do it by ourselves, but we need your support. I will try to ensure that ANOG does what they're supposed to do, which is to be remaining relevant in everything in Guyana. Mr. Ram, thank you very much for inviting me tonight.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Mr. Jonathan Yearwood, member of a new and united Guyana. Operators and viewers, thank you, good night. I'll see you next week. This program should be rebroadcast on WRHM on Sunday evening, sometime around 5:30, depending on the programming schedule. My apologies for last week. There was a technical issue. I hope this does not recur this week. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and be good. Good night.
And vaccinate.
And vaccinate. Yes, indeed.
Competitive world for low budget people, spending the time while earning in